Something has gone terribly wrong in Crimea. Once hailed by Vladimir Putin as the crown jewel of Russian resurgence, the peninsula is now sinking into chaos. The promise of stability, prosperity, and eternal unity with the motherland has vanished. In its place, a haunting reality, a region without fuel, without order, and without hope. According to reports from Meduza and Kommersant, by early October 2025, more than half of all gas stations across Crimea had completely shut down. 2 million residents, ordinary families, workers, farmers are now waiting for hours, sometimes days, just to buy a few litres of gasoline. The lines stretch for blocks filled with men holding rusty cans, women with crying children, and exhausted drivers sleeping inside their cars. Yet most return home empty-handed, their patience replaced by fury and despair. Social media platforms are flooded with disturbing images. In Yalta and Sevastopol, residents prowl the streets at night, siphoning fuel from parked cars under the dim glow of streetlights. Witnesses describe scenes that evoke the collapse of the Soviet Union, only worse. This is not just an economic breakdown, it's a total social unraveling. And the irony is painful. Russia, a country that boasts of being one of the world's largest oil producers, now cannot keep the gas flowing to its own annexed territory. The Kremlin's narrative of power and abundance is burning out at the pumps. For millions, the new daily routine is not about work or family, it's about survival in the hunt for fuel. Those lucky enough to find gasoline face a cruel reality. Prices have soared to 80 rubles per litre, an unbearable cost for workers earning a minimum wage. In response, Moscow has revived a relic from its Soviet past, a ration card system. Each person is allowed only 20 litres of fuel, a desperate attempt to restore control. But the move has only deepened public anger. The echoes of the old regime, coupons, queues, and black markets are returning to Crimea's streets. Desperation breeds innovation. Drivers now rely on underground Telegram and WhatsApp channels to track rumors of tanker arrivals. One whispered message, a truck just unloaded in Feodosia, or 20 litres allowed in Yalta, can send hundreds of vehicles racing through the night. By dawn, the pumps are dry and cardboard signs reading "No gasoline" hang across shuttered stations. For some, the pursuit ends hundreds of kilometres away, stranded on the roadside after burning their last drop. Meanwhile, the public transport system has collapsed under the weight of this crisis. With private cars immobilized, people crowd into overflowing minibuses while taxis demand outrageous fares or simply vanish from the streets altogether. Hospitals, schools and offices are paralyzed. Modern city life has reverted to a 19th century nightmare. But this is not just a story about fuel shortages. It is the visible symptom of a much deeper failure. The peninsula that once symbolized Russian triumph is now the face of systemic decay. The Kremlin's promise to turn Crimea into an impregnable fortress has dissolved into a wasteland of broken supply lines and public fury. And the question that haunts everyone from Sevastopol to Moscow is simple. How could this happen in a nation that prides itself on energy power? The answer lies in the destruction of the very arteries that kept Crimea alive. As we move deeper, we'll uncover how a series of precision strikes have turned Putin's most prized territory into an island cut off from its lifeline, an operation that may have changed the course of the war itself. To understand Crimea's gasoline collapse, one must first trace its lifeblood, the flow of fuel from mainland Russia. Every litre that powered Crimean vehicles, farms and military convoys once crossed through a single fragile artery, the Kerch Bridge, or arrived by sea through high-risk shipping routes from Russian ports. For years, this system operated like a tightrope, efficient yet dangerously exposed. And now that rope has snapped. According to data published by Russia's Business, Daily Kommersant, exactly half of Crimea's gas stations, nearly 1 in every 2, have ceased operations entirely. It is not speculation, it is measurable proof of collapse. The cause is not merely mismanagement or sanctions. It is the direct result of relentless Ukrainian precision strikes that have targeted the peninsula's energy infrastructure since late 2024. Ukraine's campaign, called Deep Strike by Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky, was designed not to seize land, but to choke logistics. Its primary objectives were 2 massive depots, the naval fuel terminal in Sevastopol, the heart of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, and the civilian oil storage hub in Feodosia. These 2 facilities were Crimea's lungs, inhaling fuel from the mainland and breathing energy into the region's economy and military. For months, satellite images and intercepted communications revealed the devastating results. Explosions lit up the night skies over Sevastopol. Columns of smoke rose for kilometers. In Feodosia, fire consumed tank farms holding tens of thousands of tons of fuel. These were not random hits. Each strike surgically severed another artery, leaving the peninsula gasping for air. The consequences are now visible everywhere. Without functioning storage depots, even fuel that manages to cross the Kerch Bridge has nowhere safe to be stored or distributed. Supply convoys sit idle on cracked roads. Civilian trucks are stranded beside empty refineries. The very network that sustained both everyday life and military operations has been crippled. Ukraine's military analysts describe this as the oxygen strategy, depriving the occupier of the vital elements needed to breathe. And it works. What Russia once advertised as an unshakable fortress has been turned into a besieged island struggling to sustain itself under logistical suffocation. According to Ukraine's National Resistance Center, the situation in Crimea is now the worst in all of southern Russia. Reports indicate that across the southern federal district, more than 220 gas stations, roughly 14%, have halted fuel sales entirely. Opposition sources like the Telegram channel Crimean Wind paint an even darker picture, claiming that Sevastopol has run completely dry. When word spreads that a tanker truck has arrived, queues stretch for miles, and within hours the precious cargo is gone. The scenes are surreal: men sleeping in cars, mothers cooking tea beside their vehicles, police struggling to control angered crowds. And through it all, the Kremlin insists the problem is nothing more than temporary logistical challenges. But as days turn into weeks, the excuse rings hollow. Local administrators led by Sergei Aksyonov initially dismissed the panic, warning citizens not to create artificial demand. Yet by late September, the tone had changed. Aksyonov finally admitted that the shortage stemmed from reduced refinery output inside Russia, a phrase that conveniently ignored the reason those refineries were failing repeated Ukrainian drone and missile strikes deep inside Russian territory. His reassurances that new shipments of AI-95 would arrive in 2 days and AI-92 in 2 weeks never materialized. Each broken promise fueled deeper resentment. Confidence in local governance, already eroded by corruption and censorship, has now completely collapsed. And with public trust gone, what rises in its place is far more dangerous: the emergence of black markets, corruption and organized crime, the dark economy of desperation that now feeds on Crimea's fuel-starved streets. As the official fuel system collapses, a new economy has taken its place, one built on fear, greed and survival. Across Crimea, gasoline has become the new currency, more valuable than the ruble itself. The Kremlin's Soviet-style rationing plan, introduced on September 29th, was supposed to restore order by limiting citizens to 20 litres each. Instead, it unleashed chaos. Within days, those ration cards turned into black market gold. Citizens who didn't need their full allowance began selling coupons online for 5, sometimes even 10 times their official value. Telegram channels overflowed with coded messages: 20 litres clean source, Sevastopol, serious buyers only. Local officials looked away, some even participated. In a land where fuel means mobility, the price of freedom now depends on who you know and what you can pay. This sudden underground economy has drawn in every level of society. Small-time hustlers sell stolen gasoline in plastic jugs by the roadside. Corrupt station managers siphon off reserves for private sale. Criminal gangs intercept shipments meant for hospitals or government convoys. It's not just an economic crime, it's a collapse of governance. Even police vehicles out of fuel have been spotted queuing alongside civilians. For ordinary Crimeans, life has become a grim negotiation. A nurse in Yalta told Meduza she walks 6 kilometers to work every morning. Farmers can no longer move their produce. School buses sit abandoned. Every aspect of daily life, from bread deliveries to garbage collection, now depends on the erratic rhythm of a smuggling market. No gasoline signs have become as common as traffic lights. The transport paralysis has rippled through the entire economy. Agricultural associations warn that the harvest could be lost entirely. Tractors and combines run on diesel, and without it, no crops can be gathered. The same applies to construction sites, delivery networks, and public services. Even the Russian military's local operations rely on emergency fuel coupons, a privilege that only deepens civilian anger. Experts from Defense News describe the situation as a silent siege where Ukraine doesn't need to invade. It simply cuts the arteries until the occupied region suffocates. And that's exactly what is happening. The once prosperous peninsula now resembles a war-torn outpost, its streets filled with queues, rumors and resentment. Meanwhile, in Moscow, officials attempt to downplay the disaster. Government spokesmen insist that the situation is under control and accuse Western media of exaggeration. But even Russian outlets like Kommersant cannot hide the numbers. Fuel distribution has fallen by half across Crimea and nearly 15% in southern Russia. The system is broken. Crimea's black market has become its only functioning institution. Local elites grow rich while ordinary citizens barter for survival. There is a bitter irony here. The Kremlin once claimed it annexed Crimea to protect its people from instability. Now that very act has delivered them into the hands of criminal profiteers. And the deeper problem is not just economic, but psychological. When the state can no longer supply, the people no longer believe. The myth of Russian stability. The social contract that traded loyalty for security is cracking before everyone's eyes. Yet even as Crimeans scramble for every drop of gasoline, Ukraine's strikes continue. The next phase of the deep strike campaign will not just target depots, it will go after the heart of Russia's logistics network itself, shaking the very foundations of Putin's war machine. While the Kremlin struggles to hide the chaos at home, Ukraine's military command is executing one of the most precise and methodical campaigns of modern warfare. The operation known as Deep Strike is not about territorial conquest. It is about choking the invaders' lifelines, dismantling the fuel network that keeps Russia's war engine alive. For months, Ukrainian drones and long-range missiles have struck with surgical accuracy at refineries, oil terminals and storage facilities from Sevastopol and Feodosia to Kursk-Belgorod, and even deep into the Russian heartland. According to open-source defense analysts and satellite imagery reviewed by Defense News, and Jane's Defense Weekly Ukraine has hit at least 85 high-value targets in just 2 months. Among them 33 military depots, 52 industrial fuel facilities. The pattern is unmistakable, a strategic throttling designed to turn the war into an economic and logistical collapse. Every strike sends shockwaves far beyond the explosion. Once Crimea's fuel arrived through the Kerch Bridge and was stored in massive depots that fed both civilians and the military. Now those depots are smoking craters. Even if convoys manage to cross the bridge, there are no longer secure facilities to store or redistribute what little fuel remains. In the words of a Ukrainian military analyst speaking to Reuters, "You can't win a war if your tanks can't move, your planes can't take off, and your trucks can't deliver food. That is exactly what Ukraine is achieving, a victory through paralysis." On the front lines, the effect is immediate and devastating. Russian armored units in southern Ukraine report severe shortages of diesel. Supply trucks sit immobilized in the mud. Artillery batteries operate at reduced capacity because their logistics hubs cannot refuel or restock in time. Command posts are forced to shut down generators to conserve energy. What Ukraine has accomplished is the invisible siege, cutting the flow without firing a single bullet at the soldiers themselves. The impact on morale is equally significant. Soldiers who hear that their families at home are queuing for hours just to buy a few liters of gasoline begin to question the very purpose of the war. Why are we fighting? One Russian conscript reportedly asked online if our own people cannot drive to work or heat their homes. That question, simple yet lethal, spreads faster than any missile. And the repercussions do not end with the army. The logistical failure in Crimea mirrors a growing national crisis. From Smolensk to Saratov, from St. Petersburg to Primorye, fuel shortages are spreading like a contagion. Nearly 3% of all gas stations across Russia have run dry, and the figure is rising daily. In a country of vast distances, such a percentage translates into an immense geographic disaster. For the first time, the Russian government was forced to take a measure it once considered unthinkable: a nationwide ban on gasoline exports until at least 2026. This is not a show of strength, it is a confession of weakness. The empire that once fueled Europe now cannot fuel itself. Even emergency shipments from Belarus have failed. In one case, a train carrying fuel to southern Russia caught fire in Smolensk, destroying the entire cargo. The images of burning tank cars have become a grim symbol of a collapsing logistics chain. And while Russia tries to extinguish these flames, Ukraine is already planning the next phase, not only to isolate Crimea completely, but to force the Kremlin into an impossible choice: feed its war or feed its people. By the dawn of October 2025, the illusion of Russia's energy dominance had shattered. What was once its greatest weapon, oil and fuel, had become its deepest vulnerability. Across the Federation, the echo of a single crisis spreads like wildfire. The empire is running on empty. In Moscow and St. Petersburg, scenes once thought impossible are now daily reality. Long queues snake through city blocks, drivers waiting for hours to refuel. Public frustration is mounting, and the Kremlin's usual propaganda no longer soothes the anger. Russians are asking a question their leaders cannot answer. If we are an energy superpower, why can't we fill our own tanks? The government's desperate export ban has only made matters worse. According to Reuters, Russia's Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak confirmed that gasoline and diesel exports would remain frozen until year's end, draining the nation's budget of billions in revenue. The Kremlin is caught in its own trap, a dilemma between guns and bread. To keep its war machine moving, it must sacrifice the domestic market. To placate the people, it must cripple its military supply. Either choice leads to loss. Economists warn that this crisis could erase up to 10% of Russia's fuel export income in the final quarter of the year, around 2.4 million tons of fuel withdrawn from global markets. The ripple effect is being felt everywhere. Brent crude prices recorded their largest weekly surge since June. Turkey, once a major buyer of Russian diesel, is already seeking new suppliers. The dominoes are falling far beyond Russia's borders. Inside Crimea, the situation has moved from shortage to systemic collapse. State institutions and military vehicles still receive priority fuel coupons, while civilians are left to fight for scraps. That imbalance is tearing the social fabric apart. They take everything for the army, one local resident complained on a Telegram forum, and we are left to walk. The once proclaimed fortress of Russian unity now feels like a prison surrounded by silence and fumes. Agriculture has nearly stopped. With no diesel for tractors, fields lie untouched. The harvest rots in place. In Sevastopol, bus lines have closed. Medical staff can't reach hospitals. Even basic food transport has stalled. What began as a logistical issue has become a humanitarian crisis. Meanwhile, the propaganda machine continues its frantic spin. On state television, officials claim the situation is improving, showing footage of fuel trucks that never actually arrived. But online, raw videos tell the real story. Endless queues, fights breaking out, soldiers guarding refineries, citizens begging for gasoline. The digital age has stripped away the Kremlin's ability to hide reality. For Vladimir Putin, the symbolism is devastating. Crimea was supposed to be his ultimate triumph, the sacred proof of Russia's return to greatness. But now that symbol lies broken. His southern fortress cannot even provide fuel for its residents. The social contract that once bound Russians to their leader loyalty in exchange for stability is dissolving at the pump. Public trust is draining faster than gasoline. Every empty station, every ration card, every unfulfilled promise deepens the wound. And while the Kremlin tries to repair its image through censorship and slogans, the people see the truth. The machine that once ran on oil is now powered only by denial. The fuel lines of Crimea are empty, but what's truly running out is something far greater: belief. For over a decade, Vladimir Putin built his legitimacy on one simple promise: loyalty in exchange for prosperity. The annexation of Crimea in 2014 was meant to be his eternal proof that Russia could deliver stability, power, and pride. Yet today, that illusion has disintegrated in the smoke of exhausted engines and shuttered gas stations. In every corner of the peninsula, the reality is impossible to hide. The so-called Crimean miracle has turned into a logistical tomb. The government that once boasted of modern infrastructure can no longer deliver fuel to its people. The grand symbol of unity with the motherland now stands as an island of scarcity, a warning sign of national decay. Putin's dream of an impregnable southern fortress is collapsing from within. The war that was supposed to strengthen Russia has instead revealed its most vulnerable flaw: dependence. Every drop of gasoline that used to flow into Crimea came through fragile arteries, the Kerch Bridge, or fuel convoys constantly hunted by Ukrainian drones. When those lines were severed, the entire narrative of invincibility crumbled. According to reports from BBC News and Deutsche Welle, the Kremlin now faces rising discontent even in cities far from the front lines. In Moscow and St. Petersburg, empty pumps have become symbols of a wider failure. Citizens whisper the question the regime fears most. If the state cannot provide fuel, can it still protect us? The psychological impact is devastating. Soldiers on the front hear that their families at home queue for hours to find gasoline. Their morale cracks. Commanders admit shortages of diesel are grounding tanks, halting artillery, and immobilizing transport. The mighty Russian war machine, once feared for its scale, now stands still, out of breath, out of power, out of purpose. The fuel crisis has reached beyond economics. It has become an existential wound. The same energy empire that once financed Russia's global ambitions is now starving its own citizens. Putin's image as a provider and protector is eroding faster than the oil revenues that sustained him. Ukraine, without firing a single nuclear missile or deploying a massive army, has achieved something historic. By cutting Crimea's lifelines, it has paralyzed an empire through logistics. It has shown that in modern warfare, precision and patience can achieve what entire armies cannot. In Sevastopol, the streets are quiet now, not with peace but with exhaustion. The engines have stopped. The fortress has fallen from within. And under the cracked asphalt of those fuel-starved roads lies the most haunting truth of all. The myth of Russian invincibility was never built on strength, but on supply. The collapse of Crimea's fuel network is more than a regional crisis, it is a turning point in history. It exposes how a modern empire built on oil and pride can crumble when its lifelines are severed. What began as a tactical campaign by Ukraine has evolved into a strategic revolution in warfare, a victory not through invasion but through exhaustion. The war has now come home for Russia. From the silent pumps of Crimea to the long lines in Moscow, every empty tank tells the same story. The era of unquestioned Kremlin control is fading. The same citizens once told that sacrifice would bring victory are now realizing they've been left to struggle for survival. It raises a question that echoes far beyond Russia's borders. When the power that ruled through fear begins to run out of fuel, what happens next? For Ukraine, this moment is more than symbolic. It is proof that endurance, strategy, and innovation can outlast brute force. For the world, it is a reminder that even the mightiest systems collapse when truth finally pierces propaganda. If this story made you think, if it showed you that what runs out first in war isn't always ammunition but hope, then make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your voice matters. What do you think this crisis means for the future of Russia and the balance of power in Europe? Let us know in the comments below. The engine has stopped. The fuel is gone. But the story is just beginning.